Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 4. Bloody Showdown with Cats. Nami and Zoro stared at their captain questioningly. He was so calm in stating that he'd murder that butler. Sure, he was a dick, but killing him. Those villagers deserved it more than he did. What do you mean, kill him? Nami asked in an elevated tone. I mean, I'm going to go to Kaya's, enjoy a nice meal, dream up some creative one-liners, and kill him around dawn. Luffy said calmly, listing off the reasons on his fingers. Stop joking. This is serious, she yelled out before looking at Zoro for confirmation, but given none. I don't think he's joking. He just doesn't sound serious. He answered her silent question, then backed away at her angry outburst towards Luffy. Why kill him? She yelled at him as she hit his head, causing a large lump. It was quite impressive that she could hurt the boy at all, given that he was a being of blood. But something about her punches managed to do it. OWW. Hey, lighten up. It's not my fault he's planning on attacking the village and killing everyone. Luffy yelled as he rubbed the newly formed lump on his head. He hadn't been hurt by a punch in years. What was up with her hits? What? She questioned before Luffy got back up from the ground. How do you know that? I overheard him and some Django guy talking at the beach. Kinda stupid that they were in public, Luffy commented absently before walking again. Turns out he's some Kuro guy and they're planning on storming the town. Don't think you're taking them all on yourself, Captain. Zoro said with a smirk as he sped up his walk. He hadn't fought anyone in quite some time now, and Luffy would need to be persuaded just to get a good one in. Fine, half of them are yours, he said, seemingly annoyed he couldn't take on the army storming the beach all by himself. You're both insane, Nami finally yelled out. We need to tell Kaya and Usopp. The villagers. She didn't care much for the people after that initial encounter, but maybe they weren't always so horrible. I have a plan for that, Luffy said with a smile. The only problem is, I suck at making plans, he said out loud, making the other two sweat drop. Unfortunately, he continued, we're going to stay there and protect her from the butler guy. Then we'll fight those guys in the morning. Then we'll have meat. An excellent plan as always, Captain, Zoro said with a smile as people ran to avoid the trio. Terrified of the seemingly harmless boy leading the pack. But why are saving these guys again? He asked as he watched them. Well, I can ask Usopp if he wants to save these guys. He may want to be the bigger man and stuff, Luffy said, puffing out some air. He didn't like these people, but getting butchered over that was a little too much. Well, will Kaya even believe us? Nami questioned as they neared her mansion, noticing the guards stare at one another. Probably not, but if he's dead, what's it matter? Luffy reasoned as they got in. He was already thinking of ways to kill him. He could make it pretty realistic. Suicide maybe, or he could make him rip himself apart. Oh, he could drown him in a bubble of blood. 10 years of prep work and now he got to use his attacks. He's got a point, Zoro said with a smirk as they passed the guards. Luffy started to search for Usopp right away. Kaya may not believe him, but Usopp wouldn't doubt that guy was evil for a second. Kaya, Usopp, Mary, I'm hungry, Luffy yelled out, forgetting all of his manners at the slightest rumble in his stomach. He almost entirely forgot of the assassination attempt on the way. We're in the dining room, Usopp yelled out, in much higher spirits. It took getting attacked by the entire town to even have dinner with Kaya, but it certainly seemed worth it to him. Finally, Luffy said as he walked in the room, noticing Nami and Zoro had beat him there while he was searching for them. It never occurred to him that around dinner time that they'd be in the dining room. He smiled at the sight of his specialty-made plate. Most everyone else had a rice meal, but he got a steak and a leg of lamb, which he snickered at when looking the sheep like Mary. You didn't tell me how you know Usopp, Kaya said quietly before taking a nice bite. She didn't want to dwell on what happened to him, it would only hurt her more. I knew his dad, he used to come by a lot to show off. Which you can do when you're the best, Luffy said with a big smile, cheering up Usopp more and more. He was thankful that he was better already, mentally if not physically. That's so nice, Kaya said with a smile before refocusing on her meal, wanting to avoid that subject. Luffy, Kaya lost her parents. Usopp whispered to Luffy, who only looked confused. Oh, I'm sorry, Luffy said, putting his head down in respect. He didn't really know what that felt like, having never really known his parents, but he knew it wasn't pleasant. No, it's fine, really. I'm just glad to have friends that keep me in such high spirits. Kaya said warmly, placing her hand on Usopp's. Oh, shishishi. Good job Usopp, she's cute. Luffy said as he elbowed his soon-to-be crewmate. He wanted a lot of girlfriends himself, but she seemed to like Usopp. That's not what she meant Luffy. Usopp yelled defensively, inadvertently pulling away from her in the process. She means we're best friends, right Kaya? Yeah, Kaya couldn't muster out the words before Luffy interrupted. Shishishi, you're both liars. I can feel both of your hearts pumping like there's an army coming after you. He laughed out before taking a large bite. You both like each other, so don't be scared of that. Excuse us. Usopp stumbled before grabbing Kaya lightly and leading her out of the room. Mary smiled warmly as he ate his salad, making Luffy laugh at his sheep-like nature. Thank you, Luffy. I thought they'd be stuck like that forever, he said calmly as he ate, making the other three look at each other. Are you just a walking lie detector or something? Nami asked nervously, worrying about any future attempts to steal from them if the time came. Kinda, neat huh, Luffy said with a smile. He already caught her once. I can do a lot of stuff like that. I can make you blush, keep you from getting cold. Zoro, he yelled out, smiling devilishly. What Luffy? He asked as he set down his drink, staring at what his captain may ask him. It only took a moment before he felt a certain rush of blood to a space it did not need to go at that moment. Ah, damn it, stop that, he yelled out, covering himself with a cloth. Luffy gripped his side as he laughed. He didn't actually know if he could do that, but it was quite the time to test it out. Should I do it on Usopp? I think I can, Luffy said before Nami hit him upside the head. OWWW, how does that even hurt me? Shut up and stop that, she yelled out, cheeks flustered with embarrassment. Luffy was going to make guys pop boners at random from now on if she didn't stop him now. Luckily for him, even if that large knot hurt, it was gone quickly. I'm just having some fun. It's not like Kaya would mind, shishishi. Luffy laughed, causing everyone to face palm. It's getting late, I'm going to bed, Nami said with a sigh as she walked to Mary. Can you show us to the guest rooms? Of course, everyone, please follow me, Mary said politely before leading the group to the single room. It only had 2 large beds, and there didn't seem to be another room for them. Sorry for the inconvenience, but we never expected to receive much company. Before Nami could even start her long and elaborate argument of how she needed her own bed for the obvious reasons, the 2 men rushed to get into a bed. They laughed to each other before looking at Nami, who started to steam with anger. I blame you Luffy. I may just share with Zoro. Nami really didn't like that idea, and from Zoro's look he hated it, but Luffy came up with something that changed her mind. Go ahead Nami, just remember my little trick. He winked and stuck out his tongue, which made her blush lightly and rub between her eyes. I swear on all the money in this sea if I wake up with anything poking me, I'll find a way to kill you, she said as she climbed in the bed and kicked him out from under the covers. No way would they both be on the same plane of sleep. Come on, what if I get cold? Luffy complained to Nami, who only sighed. Shut up, you sleep in your regular clothes anyway, she replied to his complaint. Well I may sleep in the new. I will rip it off and make sure it stays that way, she barked back, feeling him scurry to the other side of the bed. Will you two either do it or go to sleep? I haven't had a normal bed in weeks, Zoro griped to the 2, who quickly shut their yaps and let him sleep. Though Luffy could be heard snickering from Zoro's comment. Some time passed and the sun set, leaving Mary to clean the chandelier as everyone else presumably slept. Why are those pirates staying? Doesn't Kaya know the trouble they'll bring? Clawhador said bitterly as he walked past the lamb man. Well, you know Miss Kaya, she can't give up the chance to help people, Mary said happily as he polished a bulb. If she trusts them, I do as well. You should never trust a pirate, Clawhador said with a small smile as he stared out the window. 3 years of acting like he cared about these two would finally pay off. He just had to kill 3 extra children. Though I have a feeling you'll learn that lesson. Well, I'm not too worried. They seem like nice people. You should try to get to know them. They all seem very nice, most of the time. I don't think I'll need to do that, Clawhador said with a dark smile as he fitted his claws, hidden from Mary's view. I know far too many people. Luffy awoke in a cold sweat from the bed. He could feel it, spilled blood. It was a combination of survival instinct and his power. He quietly got out of the bed and crept to the area where he felt it. He wasn't typically sneaky, but he didn't want to wake up Nami at risk of his own life. You can't hurt them. Everyone will know. Mary coughed up from the floor, claw marks dug into his chest. They didn't dig particularly deep, but it was enough to knock him down. I'm sure you think that, but I've been planning this for years. No one can stop me, Kuro said with a smirk as he pressed the claws to Mary's back. No need to let him bleed out when finishing him off would be easy and quick. Shishishi, you're a real cliché, Luffy said from the doorway as he walked towards the butler. He made sure to focus on the blood circulating in his arm and prepared to rip it up in case he tried to stab Mary. I mean, look at what you did. Long drawn-out plan of infiltrating and getting close to a rich girl. Devising a plan to steal her money and settle down peacefully. Plus, you just have that villain look. Amusing evaluation, but pointless. I haven't been doing this for 3 years for you to unravel my plans. Kuro lifted his hand, despite some previously unknown resistance, and adjusted his glasses. I'm going to get her money, and her peaceful life, Kuro said before rushing Luffy with incredible speed. To his surprise, he did not move. The claws buried into the boy's gut and left his claws coated in blood. Pathetic, you weren't even capable of dodging. Z's, Luffy snored before jerking his head up. He didn't even have to pretend to fall asleep mid-evisceration, he was still pretty tired. Oh, look at that, I've been impaled, Luffy said with a smile as he pulled Kuro's arm out of his stomach. You know, you might want to try and be more creative, Luffy said plainly as his stomach reformed. What the hell are you? Kuro asked as he watched his stomach reform. He had to assume it was the infamous devil fruits he had heard about but never personally seen. One that made the boy immune to his attacks was a very terrifying thing. What am I? Luffy asked Kuro back as he started to take control of his hand. The terrified face he made was slowly being burned into Luffy's mind as he forced the blades towards his stomach. Well, I'm a boy, he said, pulling his shorts out and looking to make sure. I'm a pirate captain. I'm going to be the pirate king. Luffy decided to stop playing with the poor fool as he speared through his stomach with his own blades, tearing past vital organs that Luffy just regrew himself. But I like the term monster, or devil. He slowly brought his arm up, slicing through more organs with his razor-sharp claw knives. His strength wasn't enough to stop the slow disembowelment by his own hand. What do you think? Do I look like a devil? Luffy asked with a smile as he licked his lips. The blood spilling down his body seemed so enticing. Kuro couldn't respond, blood was slowly starting to fill his lungs. Every breath effectively felt like drowning. Drowning in his own blood after spending 3 long years to get where he was. It was a terrible end, especially by a damn child. Devil, he mouthed as he watched blood pour from the boy's eyes. The word fit scarily well, especially for the last thing he saw before he died. Luffy stared hungrily as the gaping wound in Kuro's stomach, but gave it up when he heard Mary's cough. He really hated not being able to taste the blood of his enemies, but it would have to wait. Mary would most likely be scarred far worse from that sight than the blade marks on his chest. Mary, help, doctor, Luffy cried out as he picked Mary up. It took a little longer than he would like to have admitted to realize he could stop the bleeding himself. He focused hard and bridged the gaps in the cuts himself, keeping the blood moving inside of his body. Everyone rushed in at the yell. They needed to see what was going on. The initial reaction was shock and disgust at the sight of Clawhador dead on the floor. But when they realized Mary was hurt too, the attention was focused on who they could save rather than who was already gone. Get the gauze and medical tape. Under the sink, Kaya ordered in a surprisingly demanding tone, moving out of depression and into savior mode. Nami and Zoro rushed to fetch the needed supplies as Kaya and Usopp knelt beside the injured man. "What happened, Mary? Who did this to you two?" she asked, desperately trying to hold against him. "It was Clawhador. He was a pirate," Mary coughed. Luffy was doing a good job of preventing more blood loss, but a good bit of it was still on the floor. Luffy took it upon himself to finish the story. He was planning to kill Uchiha. To kill everyone. "I didn't think he'd attack tonight," Luffy said, spitting out the last part of the sentence like a curse. "If he only killed the bastard, Mary would be fine." "Wait, Luffy, did you do that?" Usopp asked as he looked back to Clawhador. He didn't see what Luffy did to scare away the crowd, but now he knew it had to be terrifying. "He hurt Mary. Should I have given him a stern talking to?" Luffy said with a forced smile. He didn't feel bad about what he did, but it obviously upset Usopp. Kaya seemed surprisingly okay with the grisly act when she heard that Clawhador had hurt Mary. "We aren't done yet. They still plan to invade," Luffy added like a footnote. "Then we need to warn everyone." "We need to," Usopp started before Luffy cut him off. Nami pressed the gauze against the wound and Zoro wrapped it with tape to hold it in place. "I'm not a fan of those guys. But if you want to save them, don't say a word." "Zoro, you still up for fighting them?" Luffy asked as he finished taping them up. "You kidding? An army between us. They don't stand a chance," Zoro said with a smile as he stood, leaving the other three to tend to Mary. "Great. But they won't be here till sunrise. What do we do till then?" Zoro scratched his head and looked at Luffy. "I don't really know. You never think of the time between battles. Will you two shut up and help us?" Nami asked angrily as they tried to lift Mary. Zoro helped them while Luffy picked up Kuro's corpse. He had a very interesting plan involving it. Mary was watched over intently by the crew. He proved to be a surprisingly sturdy individual, up and walking by morning. Luffy was especially excited by this because that meant he got to eat breakfast. After finishing his meal, the two monsters headed off to the place they suspected the attack to happen. It made sense that Kuro's men may land at the spot closest to the meeting, and where they had docked originally. "Man, Luffy, why the hell do you have a corpse up here?" Zoro asked as he glanced at the body. Luffy didn't answer any question regarding yet, but they could see the ships on the horizon and he didn't want to wait any longer. "Oh him. Imagine how scared they'll be when they see I killed their captain. Or maybe they'll get angry. Either way it'll make it a fun fight," Luffy said with a smile. Zoro smirked at Luffy's enthusiasm. It was nice to have someone who appreciated a good fight as well. If he could actually be hurt, they could probably have a great duel, or at least a good fight. He couldn't expect Luffy to be skilled with a sword, but he could do some hand-to-hand fighting for his sake. Though Luffy reveled more in the aftermath than he did. "So what's the plan? I don't like the idea of you bursting a bubble in their brain or something while I'm trying fight." Fine. I knew there was a reason I saved some of that Kuro guy's blood," Luffy said as he drew it out of the vest he wore. The red color made it hard to notice that it was quite literally soaked in blood. A sneaky way to hide a deadly weapon in his hands. "No exploding brains," he said with a smile before looking at the ship. Those guys really liked cats. It was kind of funny. An entire crew composed of pussies. "Okay boys, we're here. Kuro has given us free reign over this pitiful island, and we wouldn't want to disappoint him," Django said to his crew as they climbed down to the beach. The thought of an angry Kuro had kept him loyal even when he technically left the crew. "Don't worry about that, you guys," Luffy yelled from atop the cliff, hiding the body for the big reveal. "What? Why?" Django yelled back, staring at the boy questioningly. "He said you can all leave. And never come back. He's a good guy now. You're the most brilliant man in the seas, Luffy. That plan has to work," Zoro said in a monotonous tone to mock his captain. "Oh, then we should go then," Django said as he turned to his men, stepping back towards his ship. It suddenly hit him that maybe other people could lie too. Besides, if he left right now it would be a lame ending in this chapter of his life. "You're lying, aren't you?" he yelled back. He knows," Luffy yelled out in surprise. I know," Django yelled back in almost equal surprise. "Come on men, we don't want to disappoint Captain Kuro." Django said as he pointed to the boy, hoarding them to attack. Did that nearly work? Zoro asked Luffy in surprise. He didn't receive an answer as Luffy hurled Kuro's dead body towards the pirates. Don't worry, he's dead, Luffy yelled before jumping down. The crew were all shaking at the sight. They feared their captain, but now he was gone. The only reaction they could have was fear at the young man who apparently killed him. Sir, we should just leave, one said weakly as he looked at the body. Django could hardly believe the sight. He had briefly suspected Kuro of going soft from the years of inactivity. But to the point of being killed by this teenager? Impossible. He turned to his men and put on a brave enough face to fool them. An army of hypnotized warriors may bring down whoever really killed Kuro. 1, 2, Django. What the hell is he yelling? Zoro asked after landing next to his captain. He saw the weird sphinx-looking guy trying to give his men a morale boost, but it would take a whole lot to bring them out of seeing their captain die. I don't know. Hey, what are you guys doing? Luffy yelled at the crew before they released a unified roar of aggression. Men, they killed your captain. You will avenge him, Django yelled, riling his hypnotized men more and more. He had to act fast and be the forceful push they needed. They charged at the two men in a blind rage, though they instilled no fear. Luffy formed a sword from the soaked-in blood. Ken, he yelled as he took a stance. He was nowhere near Zoro's skill level, but cutting and stabbing were easy enough. He wasn't affected by any attacks and he could make his sword pass through blades, so he had a large advantage. Zoro smirked at the sight of his captain brandishing a blade. It would really make things interesting for training. Three-sword style, he yelled through gritted teeth. There was quite a lot of men brandishing swords, so it felt appropriate. The two held their ground and awaited the sloppy attack. The men may have been stronger, but they lost some skill from their hypnotized gaze. Zoro easily defended himself from the attacks with his three swords, barely a nick on his body. Luffy's was in worse shape in that area. Over time those nicks and cuts would have added up to be deleterious to his fighting, but they were quickly healed before the next landed. This is no good, Nyanbon brothers. Django yelled to the boat, unleashing his secret weapons. Attack. No time to act, he ordered, sending the two to fight the enemy without the routine. There was no time to lull them into a false sense of security. Zoro, you okay? Luffy yelled out as he saw the pirates start to swarm his comrade. He was put on defense and unable to take out any more that poured in. Just fine, he grunted through his teeth as he started to push against them more. The fat one of the two brothers pushed through the pack and started his ruthless attack and forced him on defense once more. Shishishi, whatever you say, Luffy laughed as he blocked the claws of the green-haired brother. Just because he was invincible to these attacks didn't mean he was just going to get hit. Shanks warned him about always relying on his Logia defense in battle. These guys are annoying though, Luffy said as he let the sword pass through the claws and cut open the cat man's chest. The urge to take them out with all of their own blood was getting powerful. I'll say, Zoro panted as glanced at his captain. That power of his was leaving him unscathed through waves of enemies. He didn't think they had this many men, but most all of them had attacked Zoro at the sight of the three swords and more menacing appearance. Hey, I'm getting bored now. Can I just take them all out now? Luffy asked Zoro casually as he approached, bringing the blood of his fallen enemies with him at his heels. Fine, leave the fat one, Zoro said angrily as he stared at the fat bastard who wouldn't let up. Shishishi, thanks. Luffy held out the sword and started sucking up the blood. Bloody Valentine, he yelled before slamming it into the beach. The blood shot out towards the pirates in thin waves before exploding upwards in spikes, penetrating most of them entirely. They fell down on the spikes before Luffy let the spikes turn back to plain blood. The attack left very few survivors, one of which was the fat cat who was now left in a one-on-one fight with an infamous swordsman. Oh wow, that was so cool. Zoro, did you see that? He asked his friend before shutting his mouth. He didn't look like he was in a good mood. Luffy, that Django guy is gone, Zoro said through his sword angrily. He didn't need to say anything else before Luffy ran off towards the village in search of the crazy cat guy. Good, now I can fight you, Zoro panted before rushing the terrified man. He didn't even need a special attack to take him out on his own. One unified slash at his stupidly exposed stomach and he joined his brother in a blood that connected them. A fitting end for two weirdos. Damn it, damn it, Django muttered as he stumbled out of the woods. He didn't expect so much as a single opponent, let alone two superhuman fighters to take them all on was a terrible surprise. He broke through the tree line and spotted salvation. Mob justice would be better than another moment dealing with those two. Luffy ran towards the feeling of blood. It was a single person who was stumbling towards everyone, which meant it was most likely that weird guy. He broke through the tree line himself and stopped Django in his tracks. Chi-Chi puppet, Luffy yelled as he brought his arm down. Some people had gathered around to see the magic trick offered by the stranger, but were now backing away in fear. Ah, kill him, kill that boy, Django yelled out to the crowd, hoping they were particularly weak-minded and his hypnotism worked already. Unfortunately, he wasn't going to get any help. That's not nice, weird guy, Luffy said as approached. He got right behind him and brought up a blood-made dagger. He could finally taste some blood, even if it was of a crazy person. With a quick cut to the shoulder he licked his lips. All that fighting made me hungry, Luffy said quite loud, scaring the crowd and Django. Before he enjoyed his catch however, a voice dug into his head. Luffy, what are you doing? Nami yelled out with a mixture of anger and disgust. She could hardly believe her eyes at the sight of her savior about to go all vampire on some weird-looking magician. Nothing, Luffy said, putting his eyes down before scratching his head. That was a bad start if he wanted to get her to be one of his girlfriends. I stopped him. And I put some fear into those guys, Luffy said, pointing at the villagers who, very true to his word, were frozen in fear. That doesn't explain why you were looking at him like a steak, Nami yelled angrily before sighing. Look, just kill him or make him pass out or whatever you do. She had gotten too accustomed to his aggressive nature. She didn't see the value in killing many people, but Luffy had only killed pirates, so that made it better. She would need to get away from them fast if she wanted to keep that bit of innocence. Fine, Luffy groaned before rushing the blood to his head. This guy didn't actually attack anyone, so ripping him apart was unnecessary. So, where's Kaya and Usopp? Is Mary okay? He asked, ignoring the pirate he just incapacitated. They're all back at her mansion. They're fine. Come on, let's go. I'd like more pleasant company, Nami said as she stared at the villagers. Woo, victory lunch, Luffy yelled as he ran past her and towards the mansion. That idiot, he better not let me down, Nami muttered as she slowly walked after him, picturing him above a certain defeated fishman. Chapter 5. Blood Man meets Man Demon. Luffy munched down on his meal with gusto. He didn't take control of a lot of people at once, but he needed no excuse for hunger. They were all still surprised at his willingness to eat raw meat. His apparent immunity to blood-borne diseases was a perk of being made of blood. He was about to dig into another raw steak when Kaya stood to make some type of toast or announcement. Luffy, Nami, Zoro, Usopp. Kaya paused her toast to look at him. He was in much higher spirits now that she was safe. It was still hard to believe those three dropped in and rescued them from such a nefarious plot. Thank you, especially you Luffy. You not only saved Usopp, you saved everyone. If there's anything I can do for you, please, say the word, she said with a smile as she looked at the boy. Well, we could use a ship. A big ship, with a big master bedroom. Luffy yelled triumphantly, picturing a giant ship with his master suite, capable of holding him and however many women he could get to join him. Zoro's sweat dropped at the sound of the request. He knew Luffy's intent at a harem. Then consider it done. Mary, do you think you could help with that? Kaya asked her forever faithful companion. He had proved to be the most loyal friend short of Usopp. Absolutely, Miss Kaya. Give me a couple of days, Mary said before leaving. He would need to order supplies and hire workers, after drawing up some schematics. Or at least edit them so that the young man could get his master suite. Oh, you can do one more thing for me, Luffy said with a big smile, which unnerved Nami and Zoro. Kaya perked up and looked at him. A kiss would be great. Nami and Zoro went to hit him in a unified strike of anger for such blatant stupidity, but Luffy didn't feel like rubbing his head after explaining, so he morphed to blood to avoid the blows. Kiss Usopp so he stops acting like a puppy already. Yasopp would thump his nose for not asking you out yet. Kaya turned a deep shade of red as she looked back between Luffy and Usopp, who looked equally confused. She didn't however waste any time fulfilling his request, surprising Usopp with a warm kiss. Shishishi. Matchmaker Luffy. Luffy said with a big smile as they kissed, leaning back in his chair and gnawing on a raw steak. Kaya wouldn't have made a good addition to his girlfriends. Usopp would always be jealous, which means he'd have to hit Usopp a lot. This way, Usopp had a girl and Luffy got to have the rest of them. Nami was still his, or at least would be. Zoro seems more than happy to keep his sword to himself, but he may throw a swordswoman his way. A woman with sharp things in the bedroom was always something he was told to avoid anyway. Nami looked at Luffy with a little pride. He could spot that those two liked each other and decided to put them together rather than tear them apart. It was better than expected with someone aspiring to be the Pirate King. Though he was still trying to sleep with her naked in bed. That could be a reward for another time. That thought had crept in her head since last night. Her heart would always pump a little faster when he was near. Though that may be his doing with more intent than she would like to believe. You sure do make good requests, Luffy. Kaya said with a smile as she turned back towards her friends. Usopp was left frozen in place staring at her. It was quite a sight to see him seemingly frozen in time. Glad you agree. Now I have one for Usopp. Luffy said, focusing on the man who slowly thawed out of his time freeze. Join my crew. Luffy yelled as Usopp finally snapped out of it. You want me to join? But Kaya. Usopp turned to her with a frightened and questioning look, almost asking her permission to sail around the sea as a pirate. He didn't need to wait however. Of course we'll join you. I would like to leave this place, Kaya said, looking out towards the village. It was unfair that they would be nice to her but spit in Usopp's path. They went too far this time. I'm sure Mary could use a break too. He can be the one taken care of for a change. Hooray! 2 new crew mates. Luffy yelled in joy, jumping up at his success. He effectively doubled his crew in swoop. But there was still something eating at him. So, what can you two do? He asked, making his other 2 crewmates sigh. He was going to recruit the entire East Blue without ever finding out what they were good at. I've been studying medicine. I can help you all stay in good health. Kaya answered with a smile. A girl so ill studying medicine was quite ironic, but now that she was better it did make her a necessity aboard any ship. Only the insane would travel without a doctor. Oh, I can also cook some things. Mary and I would cook together when I was younger. Drive chef. So cool. Luffy yelled out, staring at Kaya in awe. That was quite a combined skill set, even if it was more towards jack of all trades rather than master of one. It was still a combo they would need. His main skill was, after all, killing people. What about you Usopp? Can you shoot the antennae off of ants? I don't think I've tried, but I am a good shot with my slingshot. Usopp said proudly, despite the sweat drop Zoro had. He obviously didn't see the power in a well-used slingshot, being a man of the sword. You will be in charge of shooting people I do not like. Luffy said in his normal peppy and upbeat tone, despite the fact that could very well be an executioner position. Though being executed by a slingshot would undoubtedly be the most humiliating execution on the planet. Aye aye Captain. Usopp responded with a smile. He would fight him for the position of captain if he wasn't so happy he was going to be a pirate and would be with Kaya. That big of a gift would be enough to keep Luffy as captain. Besides, he would be captain if he did anything stupid. He was a natural leader after all. A few hours passed and it came time once again to go to bed. Usopp decided it would be best to not try and share a bed with Kaya. It would be quite a forward advance considering they just started their formal relationship. The alternative however ended up being to share a bed with Zoro, who was less than happy with the situation. Especially since right across from them were Luffy and Nami in the same bed. After a long period of silence and the inevitable snoring of 2 male inhabitants, Nami turned to her captain and currently half-nude bedmate. He had decided to slip out of his vest this time in an attempt to fluster her. Somehow it worked. Luffy, are you awake? Nami whispered to her deathly still friend. He hardly slept, which made talking to him at night easier. Huh, yeah Nami, what's wrong? Want something to eat? Luffy questioned as he opened his eyes. That was typically why he got up, or stayed up. His shake of the head proved that she had different things in mind. Luffy, how strong are you? Nami questioned shakily. She could hardly believe she was going to ask this. To ask anyone this. But Luffy wasn't anyone. He was an invincible monster who couldn't be hurt, save a punch when he acted like an idiot, but that may be to humor her. Huh, well I can hit stuff pretty hard. Why? Luffy asked, wanting to know the reason behind this question. He was only given another. What would you do for us? For your crew, your friends? Nami was hesitant to use the term friends. She was planning to steal from him from the start, but he certainly considered her something more. If you were hungry, I'd share my meat. Luffy responded as if it were some philosophical wisdom. However that was quite a leap for the ever-hungry man. If he would do that, not much else would be out of reach. Then, I want you to help me. Like you helped Kaya and Usopp. Nami said, looking away from him as she started to move her sleeve. Luffy stared in awe at Nami as she unknowingly sent his brain into overdrive with thoughts. Her next action stopped it. There was a tattoo on her shoulder, one he surprisingly recognized. Arlong was a well-known pirate in this sea. He was able to find out about him before he left. His reputation was less than admirable. No marine who frequented the East Blue could or would touch him. Another reason Luffy hated the Marines. They only did their job when it was easy. Could you kill Arlong? If you two fought, could you promise me you'd win? Nami was softly crying as she asked him. It hurt to bare her soul to him. To finally let the dam break and let her feelings flow. She wanted Arlong dead more than she wanted the sun to rise in the morning. If Luffy could do it, he would be a godlike entity in her eyes. Shishishi. Lose to a fish. Come on Nami, you know I'd kick his ass. Luffy said with another big smile. This obviously meant a lot to Nami, which meant he would take care of it. I'll rip him to shreds for you. Nami started to weep and pulled Luffy in close, burying her face in his chest to muffle the sound. Luffy instinctively hugged her to comfort her. It still felt weird to hug a girl. Especially a crying girl, a crying friend. But she eased up on the crying from it, so it must be working. Nami wiped her eyes and looked up at the boy. He showed no fear or doubt. He was fully willing to fight the most powerful pirate in the sea because she wanted him to. With a quick pull on his shoulders she scooted up in the bed and planted a kiss on his lips. Despite Luffy's dream of being the Pirate King and having all the treasures, power, and freedom the world could offer, and his idea of having a large harem of the most beautiful women on the seas, he had no experience with girls outside of a few awkward talks with Deiden, Makino, and Shanks. Kissing was a thing and was a good start for a girlfriend. He also knew about the bird and the bees and the bears. What he didn't know was how you got from point A to point B. He pushed his lips back and mimicked her movements as best as he could manage. It was a bit of an awkward kiss, but warranted for a first. Thank you Luffy, I don't know if I can ever repay you. Nearly 100 million belly in savings and she couldn't think of a single way to pay back the favor. All the treasure in all the blues could be at his feet and she'd find more. Though from how some pirates were she'd be on top of that pile in some gold bikini or something. Shishishi, you're my friend, no need to repay me. Luffy responded honestly, though a thought crept into his brain. But you could be my first girlfriend. The king of the pirates needs a lot of them, and you could be the first. Luffy's follow-up may have hurt his game under regular circumstances, but he did just agree to kill an evil fishman dictator. A lot of girlfriends. What do you mean? Nami could feel a kind of throbbing pain in her heart. She wanted to be his girlfriend. But being just another one in the crowd would be a hard thing to deal with. It was only thankful that Arlong considered humans a subspecies not worthy of his company, that she wasn't one already. I don't know if I want to be just another girlfriend Luffy. What do you mean? You'd be my first girlfriend. That's pretty memorable. Besides, why wouldn't I want a big harem? Especially filled with women as pretty as you. Luffy's simplistic view on the ordeal provided Nami with some comfort. He would probably just gawk and show off most of the women he got, at least later on. But being forgotten would definitely not happen if she agreed. That however did leave one question. Would it be better to share him, or not have him at all? The question was answered with one reassuring smile before she made it form a pair of puckered lips. "I'd love to be your first, Luffy," Nami said, smiling at her own clever little line. Luffy wanted to yell in celebration, but that would be rude. That and he would probably deafen his first girlfriend. He instead opted to give her another big kiss and pull her in for a hug. He was however able to elicit a small scream of surprise from her. "What the hell are you doing?" Nami whisper yelled as Luffy tossed his shorts off of the bed and sprawled out on his side of the bed. She couldn't believe that moments after she agreed to be his girlfriend he expected them to just have. "Well, it's rude to sleep in bed naked with a crewmate. It's fine do it with a girlfriend, right?" Luffy asked, looking at her as if he had done nothing wrong. It was arguably true considering his intent was only to sleep in the buff, but that may just be because him getting his way was a reoccurring theme since she had joined the crew. "Fine, but don't jab me with your thing while I sleep." Nami could hardly believe that was a sentence she needed to say to her captain, yet there it went. Out of her mouth and into the world forever. It would be sad if it weren't such a happy occasion. "Shishishi. No promises. I do have a bit more blood than most people, so it's gotta go somewhere." Luffy teased as he pulled the covers up a bit, smiling at a blush on her face so bright he could almost see it in the dark. The next few days were, for the most part, uneventful. Luffy got to enjoy one of his favorite pastimes, messing with villagers. He'd spend hours in a nearby tree, messing with their blood for the sheer fun of it. It did however give him more practice with his power. Surely not every Logia fought with element like he did. Ace surely didn't, but he didn't know anyone with actual fire pumping through their veins, so that may make the difference. He did know he wouldn't trade his power in for any other. Being able to make a man lock up in the legs and fall over was just too funny. Being functionally invincible and being able to play jokes on people. Best power ever. The ship was complete. It was Mary's magnum opus. His pride and jow. It had a lamb on it for crying out loud. The ship was of slightly larger proportions than initially intended. It had to be fitted with a large master, or rather captain, suite for Luffy and his cute girlfriends to sleep in. For Kaya and Usopp's sake there was still a women's dorm and a men's dorm, so she wouldn't have to bunk in the Pirate King-sized bed with Luffy. Though it was only a couple of beds, there was heavy doubt too many women would join without Luffy trying to get them. Men's dorms were standard for all intents and purposes. A few hammocks for however many crewmates he would like. "So cool," Luffy yelled as he launched himself up and onto the ship. He started looking around every nook and cranny before Mary could even start to discussing the features. Luffy would likely find them all before he could finish talking. In fact, just as he started discussing the steering, Luffy bounded back out and snatched Nami off her feet. "Come look at our room. It's huge," he said before rocketing back on the ship with legs spewing blood. It almost made Mary faint from the sight of a boy using his own blood as a rocket booster, but he did see a man tear his own insides out, so it was tame in comparison. Zoro was confused by one thing however. They would share a bed. Those two were hanging out with Kaya and Usopp a lot, sure, but that meant they were a couple. Kaya seemed disappointed in his ignorance when he asked them about it, but it couldn't be helped. The poor swordsman didn't have a woman yet. They explained the situation as best as they could, but left the details out. "I'm glad you two have decided to go together. Do be safe, Miss Kaya," Mary said to his longtime friend, fighting the tears in his eyes. He didn't expect to see her leave, but he wouldn't stop her. She was finally happy again. "And you, young Usopp." Mary refocused his attention on the young man by her side. He was prepared to give a long and threatening speech about how he needed to protect her, but he knew it was unnecessary. He told those stories to her to cheer her up and seem like a brave man. He could merely prove it now. Treat her well. "Of course, Mary. Take care," Usopp said with a smile. He wanted to say more, but it wouldn't help. Long speeches were for his crew now. Besides, he didn't want to cry in front of Kaya anymore. Not over something as silly as leaving his home and friends behind. Holding his tears back was getting a lot more difficult. Kaya on the other hand didn't hold back. She cried and hugged him, barely able to speak. She was leaving an entire life behind to start a new one. In doing so, She was leaving behind one of her best friends. I'll miss you, Mary. Live a good life, okay? You let me live one. Mary let the tears flow as he hugged his surrogate daughter. He didn't want any harm to come to her. He wanted to protect her from the cold world. She had already lost her parents, now she was journeying out with pirates. But she was journeying with friends. You too, Miss Kaya. Always be happy that you have such great friends. It was another few minutes of tears and hugging before Zoro started to drag Usopp up on the ship. His screams of distress got Kaya's attention, and she hastily hurried to the ship to get the brute to lighten up on her storybook boyfriend. Bye, Mary. Thank you for everything, Luffy yelled from the ship back to the former butler, now multimillionaire. He did have a confusing look as three children ran up beside the lamb man brandishing wooden swords and yelling about kidnapping their captain. Hey, Usopp, you know those kids? Luffy asked Usopp, who was crying as he gritted his teeth. Usopp, pirates, you are disbanded. Fight for what you love. Defend your homes, Usopp yelled, ordering his former men to protect their families. He hadn't seen them in days, likely because of their families, but it certainly wasn't their fault. The three were left crying as they waved goodbye to their captain. Wow, heavy departure, Luffy said plainly as he looked towards the island. He was no stranger to sad goodbyes. Ace's departure brought tears. Sabo's brought outright heartbreak, but it's not like anyone died, besides people who deserved to anyway, so there were more important things. Kaya, I'm hungry, Luffy yelled, completely disregarding the sad mood when his stomach growled. Do you even need to tell us, Luffy? You can eat steak raw, Nami said, emphasizing the can portion of the sentence to make sure he would grasp that he shouldn't do it too often. But if he was going to bother them constantly for food, it would help sometimes. So, I don't want to all the time. Variety slices up rice, Nami, Luffy said, stumbling through a quote he heard once, a long time ago. I don't think that's the saying, Luffy, but I'll cook you something, Kaya said before heading to the kitchen. It would keep her mind occupied and off of the departure. Drive chef saves the day, Luffy yelled out, rushing to the kitchen behind her. He wanted food and he wanted it fast. Aimlessly sailing around the sea was, for lack of better terminology, boring. Luffy was anxious to arrive at their next destination. From his understanding, they would go kick some fish guy's ass off of his body. Actually, maybe not. Did fishmen have butts? Did they poop? Luffy took a mental note to make sure whether or not fishmen poop before kicking their ass off of their body. If they didn't poop, he'd need to kick some other part off. To pass some time, Luffy and Usopp decided to test out the cannons on board. They doubted they'd ever actually use them. Luffy was more the up-close and rip-your-insides-out kind of fighter than real nautical combat, so his skill with a ranged weapon was very poor. One thing stopped Usopp from firing his next shot, however. While he was an expert sniper, Luffy still had the ability to feel where people were, and two were on the rock they were about to use for target practice. Hey, why are you guys on a rock? Luffy yelled to the two unseen men. We need help, please, a voice yelled back desperately. Luffy ordered them to steer a little closer to pick them up. Two people on a rock in the middle of the sea would make a terrible duo to try and rob pirates. Especially a sniper, a fiery redhead, a green-haired swordsman, a chef doctor, and a blood man. Luffy helped them up as best as he could without terrifying the two. With a quick pull they were up on the ship, a little worse for wear. One far worse than the other. He couldn't stand on his own and his teeth were falling out. A quick cough of blood and Luffy could tell he needed food. He didn't know the exact way he could examine the blood, it just felt like it was missing something most blood had. Kaya, we need help. He's dying. What? She yelled in shock as she rushed to the man. She hadn't been out to sea a day and someone was already dying. With a quick examination she determined what was wrong with him. It was one of the easiest things to fix on the seas. Scurvy. She ordered them to fetch some limes and lemons. One to cure it, the other to scare the lesson into him that he needed more vitamin C. She enough with a squeeze of a few limes and one particularly sour lemon. He was up and dancing, albeit with a concave mouth. The sudden recovery shocked the doctor chef, the slightly experienced navigator, and the blood captain who had just examined the vitamin-depleted blood moments ago. So who are you guys anyway? Why were you on a rock? Luffy asked as they stopped dancing. Or rather, stopped their dancing by asking them. I'm Johnny. And I'm Yosaku, the two said as if they were preparing to reveal a team name. We crashed on that rock not too long ago. Thank you for saving my bro. Johnny said, rushing to bow to Luffy, over and over. Nice to meet you guys then. I'm Luffy, that's Kaya, Nami, Usopp, and... Hey, where's... Before Luffy could ask, the two wayward strangers rushed them. Thank you big sis Kaya. Thank you big bro Luffy. The two yelled out, each hugging one of the aforementioned people then switching out. The yawn of a swordsman however brought them away from the two, to their relief. Big bro Zoro, you're here too, they yelled in unison before rushing towards him. Johnny, Yosaku, what are you two doing out here? Zoro asked, rubbing his eyes and trying to focus. He had missed the scurvy fiasco entirely and was now questioning why the sudden appearance of two old friends. Well, we were trying to go to this restaurant ship, the Barati, for some food, but apparently some pirates were about to attack and, well, no pirate has ever been too friendly with bounty hunters. But what are you doing here big bro? I'm a pirate, Zoro said with a smile, making them shake just a bit from what they just said. That meant they were on a pirate ship. Something they said caught Luffy's attention. Food, yes of course, but more. Pirates and attack, a fight. Do you know where this Barati is? I like food, Luffy said, burying the more sinister reason. A good old-fashioned bloodbath. In the sea, where he couldn't actually get in. Well, he couldn't a bath anyway. A good old-fashioned blood shower. We can probably figure our way back, but we don't know why you would. It was a pretty big fish after the ship, Don Krieg. Johnny informed them as Yosaku fetched another lime. I think I've heard of that guy, he likes shiny stuff and throws his men at his problems. Lots and lots of men. Luffy informed his crew, typically something like that would scare a crew. Don Krieg was pound for pound more powerful than Arlong. But that's only counting the pounds of his 50 ships worth of men. But if anything, Luffy thrived in combat against multiple enemies. If Krieg had all of his ship, Luffy would probably rip them all apart. His power could be compared to a terrifying snowball rolling down a mountain, building up strength as it goes. Except with Luffy, it's a mountain of blood. Yeah, you'd be crazy to take him on. They said, though his crew knew immediately where this was headed. We're so going to fight that guy, Luffy said with a smile before climbing up on the figurehead. He didn't even bother turning around when he yelled, Nami, set sail towards wherever the Barati is. Aye aye, Captain, Nami muttered as she walked to the rudder, dragging the two guests with her for directions. She couldn't believe she hadn't heard of this place yet. More importantly, she couldn't believe Luffy would take a detour on killing Arlong to go stop this Krieg guy from taking a restaurant. At least it was valiant of him, unless he just wanted free food. Shishishi. Free food and I get to fight an army, my life is great. Luffy thought as he straddled the lamb's head, looking down at the water and feeling all the aquatic life just below. Hours passed. Boring hours to Luffy. He was promised a battle with the most powerful pirate crew in the entire blue. Every second not punching or stabbing a guy was time wasted in his opinion. But luckily he saw something in the distance. It was a marine ship. A big one at that. Luffy decided to act natural. So he walked to the railing and yelled at a bunch of marines as they all ate around a man tied to the mast. Hey, you guys seen a restaurant ship? Luffy asked, making them all lose focus. Yes, great food, terrible service. A bandaged and bruised pink-haired man said, eyeing the ship. Are you pirates looking for it? Yeah, we heard some Krieg guy was going to attack it. I wanna fight him, Luffy answered happily, shocking the entire marine ship. Luffy then started to understand why they weren't there to protect it. They were scared of Krieg. You guys chicken or something. Luffy, don't insult the marines like that. Usopp yelled in anger and fear at his captain, who was poking the bull with a very pointy stick. We are not chicken, pirates. I'll prove it. Open fire on their ship. The captain said almost apathetically. He was obviously in no mood to deal with them any longer, which was very bad for their sake. If any of you do that, I'll beat the crap out of everyone aboard your ship. Luffy said coldly at the pink-haired weirdo, who stopped to look at him. His men looked at him questioningly before he motioned for them to fire the cannons. "Hey guys, I'll be right back," Luffy said with a smile before hopping on the railing and launching to the ship. The Marines all pointed their rifles in unison at the boy. At least 24 had encircled him, which only made Luffy smile. They shouted a threat at him, then ordered him to leave, but he started laughing. "I bet you could all fire at once and still miss me," Luffy said, taunting them still. He knew precisely what would happen when they fired, and it would be hilarious. They took the bait like it was live duck. They fired in relative unison, only 3 saved from being shot by a comrade, even though they ended up shooting them. Luffy laughed. Some of those shots really did miss, but most passed clean through him and into the person opposite of them. "Wow, Marines are dumb. This will be too easy," Luffy said as he absorbed the blood of those shot. His luck that 2 of them were matching blood types, so that could be a reserve. "Chi-chi shards," Luffy yelled as he launched some blood-made daggers at charging Marines. His body had slowed the bullets down to flesh wounds, and the shards weren't too deep, though one may have gotten a guy in the thigh and scared him to unconsciousness. All of these guys were just morons following what could be Kobe's long-lost dad. Luffy squatted ever so slightly to secure his position as a lot of swordsmen charged him. His fists were sure to beat their swords. Full Body himself joined the fray as the main infantry were brought down by nothing but a fast series of punches. Gatling seemed an appropriate term for that flurry. Full Body thought he would obviously have an advantage in a bout of fisticuffs. Luffy opted to humor him and not launch a storm of fists. Simple boxing, with a guy with iron knuckles. He ducked down under the swing and jabbed him right in the gut. He felt blood seeping inside. Whoever kicked his ass before did it well. Some internal bleeding he could focus his hits on. Full Body felt the errors of his ways as the body blows kept rolling in. He could take down most people with one punch, but if he could never land it, that meant nothing. One last strong right, and he was on the ground, gripping his stomach and coughing up blood. Luffy's fist had finally done the trick and his small intestine had finally burst. Luffy stood over him and roared out triumphantly, scaring the rest of the Marines on the ship. Unfortunately for them, he didn't want to be made a liar. There was nowhere to run from the monster. His fists rocketed towards every Marine he could find and connected with their face or something much more fragile, but at least there was no bone in that part of the body to break. Luffy was confident no Marine on the ship would attack them again, but there was a captive left to deal with. "Oi, who are you?" Luffy asked the weak, almost dead man. "Jin, please, do you have food, and some water?" Jin pleaded with the monster. He was getting ready to embrace death, but this was a slim chance at survival. "Sure, Dr. Chef Kaya, we have a patient who needs food, stat," Luffy yelled back at his ship before cutting his bindings with a clotted blood finger. Luffy assisted him back to his ship and brought him immediately to the kitchen for treatment. "Thank you all so much. This food is delicious," Jin said as he hungrily shoveled food in his mouth. Kaya instinctively went to cook him some more. She could keep them fed, but the finer things escaped her skill level. "I can't thank you enough." "Shishishi, you're hungry, right? That stuff sucks. I can't stand being hungry," Luffy said, shocking everyone by offering him his plate as well. The overwhelming amount of kindness caused their guest to weep into his meal. "No one's ever been this nice to me. Thank you," Jin choked out as he hid his face, not wanting his saviors to see him cry. He was a demon with ice in his veins. Though after watching that boy, he may need to rethink his title. "Oh, don't worry about it, no point in leaving you there after all," Luffy said with a smile, digging into his plate of food with just as much gusto as a starving man. "You wanna join our crew? Something tells me you're a pretty tough dude for them to have captured and tortured you like that." "I'm sorry, but I'm already in a crew," Jin replied, solemnly. He would have undoubtedly joined the boy if it weren't for his prior commitment to the greatest pirate he'd ever known. "Whose crew?" Luffy asked, cocking his head as he usually did. "I am a commander of the Krieg Pirates. Right hand of Don Krieg, the man who will become the Pirate King." Chapter 6. War of Blood and Fear. Luffy's eye twitched at the declaration from the man he saved. His crew looked at him with a certain level of fear, like he'd rip the guy apart just for saying it. But Luffy surprised them all when he started to laugh. You must really like this guy. Sorry I'll have to kick his ass, but I'm going to be the king of the pirates. Luffy said confidently as he plopped in a seat across from him and snatched up a raw steak he had waiting for him. If Kaya was going to be busy cooking Jin food, Luffy didn't have time to wait. Jin stared daggers at Luffy. He didn't like the threat to his captain, but he was on another pirate's ship, so it could be forgiven. Well, you sure hold yourself high to beat the most powerful person in East Blue. I welcome the challenge, but we will beat you. Jin smiled a bit before Luffy started to eat his raw steak. He had done some pretty ruthless things, so if this kid was trying to scare him, it wasn't working. But wringing out the blood in a glass and drinking it was pushing the envelope for even his taste. Vampires shouldn't be out at day. Or at night either. The moon reflects sunlight. Yeah, you can try. But I doubt he'll be too much of a threat if he's resorted to attacking little restaurants. Luffy laughed softly at his jab at Jin's captain. Well, he's trying to rebuild his fleet then. He lost half of his fleet when he sent a scouting party into the Grand Line. But even with 25 ships he's still the strongest pirate in the sea. Jin defended his captain with gusto, however it backfired. He lost 25 ships. Most of the crew yelled in unison at just how dangerous the Grand Line was. If it was a scouting party they probably weren't in there a week. Luffy didn't see this as a testament to the dangers of the Grand Line. So you're all that weak. Now I know I could beat you. Luffy laughed at the fate of half of the Krieg pirates. Completely annihilated so quickly. They were either weak or dumb. Or most likely both. Don Krieg himself would have made it easily. He just wants to get more men before we go and conquer the line. Jin said, trying to convince himself more than them. All of his efforts were to keep his men alive. He didn't even know if anyone was left from the trip. So many died from some angel of death in a floating coffin. Shishishi. Whatever you say, we're going to go kick his ass anyway. I guess you'll be fighting me then. Luffy said with a smile, sticking out his hand. Normally he wouldn't be this respectable. But Jin was a loyal crew member to that Krieg guy, even in the face of nothing but enemies. It took Kintama. I suppose we will. I never did catch your name. Any of you, Jin said, looking around at the people who had saved him. Even with the assurance that they would be enemies, they all smiled. I'm Nami, the world's best navigator. I'm Roronoa Zoro, and I'm going to be the world's greatest swordsman. I'm Usopp, brave warrior of the sea. I'm Kaya, adventurer. And I'm Monkey D. Luffy, future king of the pirates. They all introduced themselves to their enemy with big smiles. The trio of weaklings were taken aback by it, but Jin seemed to befriend Luffy right away. That was all they needed. I am Jin, the man-demon. I hope you reconsider fighting Don Krieg. Just leave him alone. Jin didn't ask any of them to change their minds. It would do no good. But if he could just convince them to ignore Krieg, they may yet live. You worry about that when we get there, Luffy said with a laugh before hearing the word bro being yelled at them. They all walked outside of the kitchen to see what the hell they were yelling about. Sure enough, it was worth the term, bro. 25 large ships headed by a massive galleon. Everyone but Jin and Luffy stared in awe at the fleet. Jin and Luffy's attention were on the meager-looking fish restaurant surrounded by purple clouds. Jin immediately knew what it was, and stared in horror. He used MH5. That place couldn't have a force near what we have. Jin commented mostly to himself at the sign of chemical warfare. Krieg would typically only bring that out on the toughest or largest of armadas. This was overkill, even compared to villages they attacked and flooded with gas. Those people stood to fight them on land. I'm going to enjoy this. Luffy coldly as he stared towards the flagship. They were slowly drifting closer, and he could feel their blood. It was overwhelming to have a couple thousand people around at once, but it was certainly interesting. Hey Jin, you can swim right? Luffy asked as he hopped on the railing. Yeah, wait why? He asked with a yell as Luffy grabbed his arm. I may need to drop you off, Luffy said with a smile before launching out towards the armada. Jin was left grabbing what remained of his leg for support. The force behind using his legs as rockets was enough to let them sail over the poison and onto one of the ships. Though at first they received a variety of weapons pointed at them from the commotion. At least neither ended up in the ocean. Jin, you're alive, the crew yelled as they started to point their guns down. It was a weird relief to see the man-demon again. He was just as brutal to them as their enemies, but Krieg used him more on the latter. "Don Krieg, sir, Jin is back," one of the men yelled as he ran to starboard. Luffy pouted when he realized he wasn't on the flagship, but at least he was only one away. "Then tell him to get over here. I need that scouting report." Krieg yelled back angrily, showing little compassion at the return of his most valuable pirate. Luffy frowned at the sound of his order. It was shameful to not even be thankful he was alive. "Right away, sir," Jin yelled before ordering the navigator to steer them closer so he could jump to the ship and give his report. Luffy sighed and launched towards the ship with Jin in tow, dragging him through the air with the grace of a flailing child. He would really need to get used to that. With a large thud they landed on the deck of the Dreadnought Saber, flagship of the Krieg pirates. "Jin, who is this boy?" Krieg asked, focusing his attention on the boy by Jin's side. Everyone on board knew that being the center of Krieg's focus was like being the target in a firing range and backed away from the stranger. Except for Jin, who put himself between Krieg and Luffy in a subconscious attempt to protect his rescuer. "This is Lu. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm going to be king of the pirates," Luffy said, stepping out from behind Jin. If Krieg attacked him, it was all the excuse he needed to rip his fleet to shreds. Krieg started to laugh from the boy's insolence. Staring face to face with the most powerful pirate in the sea, and he had the kintama to say such blasphemy. "Quite the moron you've found, Jin. But I'll deal with him later. What did you learn in the line? What happened to my ships?" You don't know, sir. We were wiped out by some monster. He showed up and he cut our ships apart, sir." Jin could hardly speak clearly as he gave his improper report. Luffy put a hand on his shoulder in an attempt to comfort him. Hugging would be the usual go-to, but Krieg didn't seem like a big hugger, so it may be weird. "What the hell do you mean, cut? Did you lose your mind on that sea? A man can't just cut ships." Krieg yelled furiously at his subordinate. This kind of nonsense info was useless to him. He sent those ships to see if he was ready to bring his reign on the Grand Line rather than this weak sea. The mere notion of a man cutting apart 25 ships was pure insanity. This was more than a man. He carried a black sword and sailed on single-man ship. He launched giant cuts that tore through our ships. "Sir, we lost all of our ships within a week," Jin declared to Krieg as loud as he could. His men needed to know that they weren't ready for that sea. Not yet. They'd need get every possible ship and pirate they could just to hope to survive. "Stop talking nonsense just to make up for incompetence. We have a ship to add to our fleet," Krieg said as he stomped towards the raving underling. "That ship is commanded by Red Leg Zeph, former pirate on the Grand Line. When we get his log book, we'll know everything we need about the Grand Line. Your failed scouting expedition may yet be salvaged." Krieg handed Jin a pair of replacement tonfas and pointed at the fish ship. "If any of them are left alive in there, fix it," Krieg ordered before looking at the stranger. "Now, boy, did you rescue Jin?" "Yeah, some Marines had him tied up to the mast and were eating food in front of him. He didn't seem to have been fed in days. I don't think he should be fight." One quick move of the arm and Krieg wielded his derringer. One quick squeeze and a bullet went through Luffy's stomach. The quick movement of the action led it actually hit him, but the wound healed within moments. Luffy, however, knew no normal person would react that way and gripped his stomach, feigning pain as he coated his hand in blood. "You do not get to tell me what my men should do. I am Don Krieg, most feared pirate of the sea," the rectangle-headed man yelled in anger at the boy. The news that half of his fleet was lost in a single week had angered him, but his ego was as strong as ever. "Ha, so scary," Luffy said, coughing up some blood on the deck. He was greatly outnumbered, but nowhere near outmatched. "May as well have some fun. I bet I can be scarier," Luffy said, standing up straight rather than doubling over his non-existent wound. Krieg fired once more at the pest, hitting him square in the chest. Blood shot back as the boy gripped the bullet wound. "Unless my men are scared of dead bodies, you won't even faze them," Krieg said with a smile as Luffy fell back. Only one person got to see Luffy's smirk as he landed on his back and turned into a pool of blood. It splashed on everyone but Krieg and Jin, who were the only ones not on the verge of throwing up. "Don Krieg, what did you do?" "Luffy saved my life," he didn't deserve. That, Jin had never been explained Luffy's power, so he didn't get to experience what Luffy's other friends would in that situation. Dread was the overwhelming feeling within him now. The only person to ever show him kindness just experienced a death so grimly that it liquefied his body. Krieg couldn't even climb to the top on a mountain of dead bodies if this was his ability. It would be a sea of blood. A sea of blood would be the perfect term to describe what Luffy would leave behind. All the blood he scattered bored into the unprotected flesh of the pirates on the deck. Men screamed in pain and horror as they were attacked by blood. In the midst of it all something arose from a puddle in the center, where Luffy initially landed. As more men fell to the ground, either dead or on the verge, blood came to it and it grew more and more. It was a tall human-shaped being of blood. There was no sign that it was the happy-go-lucky boy from just moments before. There was no warm smile that comforted those who needed it. No wide eyes looking at everything with excitement. The eyes that formed were barely human. Red orbs that bore fear in the minds of a man-demon and a heartless captain. As the last man hit the floor, familiar features returned. Shaggy black hair, a scar under his eye, a mouth pulled back in a smirk. The one thing that remained was his eyes. Cold, red, and unblinking. Told you I'm scarier. Krieg stared in horror as the blob turned to the human he swore he just killed. He had lost dozens of men in moments because of this monster. This demon. He shakily stepped back, thinking of what weapon could possibly stop him. What are you? Krieg yelled in desperation before unleashing every weapon he had on him. A dozen guns firing in unison at the boy. They didn't even faze the boy. Or rather, they phased right through him. Luffy laughed at him, a deep gargling laugh of a man laughing through blood. I'm Monkey D. Luffy. I'm going to be Pirate King. Luffy said before looking around. Chi theft. Luffy said calmly, sticking out his hand and absorbing all of the blood he had spilled. He had an overwhelming sense of calm amongst the devastation. He could feel the blood moving in most everyone nearby. Over 2,000 blood sacks waiting for him. All men target this thing. Use every weapon you have. I will not let it win. Krieg yelled with such intent that his vocal cords nearly tore. He couldn't yell louder if his own mother was being shot right in front of him. He needed to wipe this thing off of the planet fast. Jin was frozen. Be it out of fear or wonder, he couldn't tell, but it was crippling. Luffy couldn't even be a human being, yet he spared him. His crew wasn't as lucky. At least none of them seemed to suffer. He went for quick, albeit bloody, kills. That mystery man had cut them apart at random. So many men drowned because of injuries, so this was comparatively mercy. Shishishi. You've lost one bet already. Luffy said as he walked towards Krieg. He wasn't worried about an attack from him. Those guns kinda tickled, but he couldn't take out the other ships from there. I bet I'll win, Luffy said before launching at the nearest ship in a streak of blood. He made sure to bring it back with him as he launched, conserving all of his weaponry as he could. Jin, stop standing around. We need to kill that boy. Krieg yelled at the man-demon with obvious fear in his voice. He had no idea how he could fight him at this point, but surely if they all focused fire he wouldn't stand a chance. Get every ship we have. I'm going to order the men below deck to target whatever ship he's on. He will not leave here alive. Yes sir, Jin said as he ran towards the opposite ship. It tore at his insides to follow that order. Krieg attacked first and unprovoked, but it wasn't the first time. He would just need to get Luffy quickly. No one else needed to die. Meanwhile, aboard the Going Merry. Big Bro Zoro, where did Big Bro Luffy go? Johnny asked Zoro as they looked at the fleet of ships before them. They had just been floating there, staring at the scene. Nothing was happening, at least nothing anyone could see. Well, if I know Luffy, he's attacking the strongest pirate crew in the sea single-handed, and we're all going to wait around. Zoro said as he stared into the distance. He had learned to not worry too much about what Luffy was doing. If he wanted to take them all on, he wasn't going to be talked out of doing it. Helping would probably be suicide. Each of those ships had to have at least 100 men on board. The most they could do was wait, or maybe go to that restaurant. The poison had finally dissipated and made it safe to approach. At very least its enclosed design made it safer to be in than their exposed caravel when it came to that poison. Nami sailed them towards the waiting vessel with care. They would need to be close if they wanted to rush on. At least it had drifted away from the giant mass of death that was still waiting for them. They all rushed and started to pound on the boarded-up entryway. Every nook and cranny had been sealed, most likely after hearing about or seeing the poison. If it worked, they'd still be alive and they could rescue them all while Luffy distracted the fleet. If not, maybe they had some savings stored in a chest somewhere. Either way, it was worth trying. "Let us in. We're here to help," Nami yelled at the door, awaiting a response from inside. If anyone inside was alive, tearing down their protection could make them attack. Or worse, give the pirates an opening to which they could launch more poison. Luckily for them, the cries of a woman's voice pierced the ears of a valiant prince who could let no woman be left outside to the terrible menace. "Beautiful maiden, let me help you," a voice yelled as some of the boards were removed from the wall. Yelling about dirty tricks boomed from the inside, but the voice cursed them all for suggesting any woman should be left outside during this siege. When the blonde-haired chef saw no pirates awaiting them, but instead a beautiful orange-haired woman, he kicked the rest of the barricade down with a single movement to allow her access. "Get inside, you beautiful damsel, you," he yelled with hearts in his eyes. When some more men followed in after, he was less than pleased, but another blonde woman perked his spirit. "So you're not pirates. That's good. Sanji would kick us all to death if we had to kill you. At least, you two," the bearded man with a peg leg said to the group, then specified that the two women would bring him distress. "You won't dare hurt those beauties, old man," Sanji yelled defiantly. "I won't let you be hurt, my ladies." Sanji slid to them with a rose between his teeth, arms spread to accept their loving embrace. Right, we need to get out of here. Our captain is distracting Krieg, so you can all join us and we can get out of here." Nami tried to ignore the advances of the young man and focus on the people trapped inside. "We aren't going anywhere. We plan to fight those what do you mean your captain is distracting them?" The bearded man in charge had to question what the hell one person could be doing to distract 25 ships worth of bloodthirsty pirates. "Based on the yelling I heard, he's tearing them apart," Zoro said with a smirk, shocking the people. He didn't look down on them for hiding. You can't cut poison till it stops after all. But Luffy wouldn't be slowed down by anything, and it made these guys look weak in comparison. "Well, I'm not being showed up in front of these beautiful ladies. Let's go kick these guys' asses," Sanji said, trying to rile the chefs up. The plan was to wait out their poison until they started to attack man to man. They showed too much interest in it to blow it to shreds, so they would definitely try to board. None of them would dare leave their only home. "How do you plan to do that? This isn't a man of war, damn it. We have to wait for them, and we're not going anywhere," the old man declared, walking back to his seat, waiting for the moment he'd need to go and defend his home. Damn it. Sanji kicked a table to splinters as he walked away, earning some threats from the chefs. It was astonishing that they could bicker over the interior when they were on the verge of being attacked. Or rather, they would be if someone wasn't distracting them. Luffy landed with extreme force, cracking in the deck of ship number 1 on his list. He expected the wave of attackers that followed when he landed. He had only taken the blood of a couple dozen off that first ship, but this one was going to wiped out. "Ken," Luffy said as he formed a single-edged blade of blood. His swordplay would improve if he kept using it. Zoro would probably appreciate a decent sparring partner. Punching people in the face was something he could chalk up to being a master at. He launched at the charging pirates and performed a slice, hitting 3 of them in the gut and causing them to fall. He kept dueling with the charging men, being less than fair at times by moving his blade through the sword locks and into his attacker. With each cut he attacked with greater and greater force. Fueled by the spilled blood he added to himself as he moved. Even when surrounding him on all sides, the men stood no chance. No blows injured him. No cuts made him bleed. No bullets made him flinch. He just kept cutting them apart and stealing their blood. He was a force of nature with a thirst for blood. By the time the nearby ships had received their orders, the ship had already been cleared of allies. 100 men cut apart and drained by a lone boy. The cannon fire gutted the insides in moment. Every ship in the area were determined to bring it down and take him with it. However, Luffy launched to the nearest ship and climbed up to the crow's nest. "Hey, that's a lot of ships. You think they'll fire with all of you on?" Luffy yelled down to the pirates below, toying with them and making them shake with fear. Luffy knew someone like Krieg would take down his entire crew just to take him down. Though that was a fair point since he was going to do the same thing anyway. Krieg wouldn't have a single crew member to order around anymore. Sure to Luffy's sadistic taunt, the ships opened fired on their allies. A dozen cannonballs crashed through the ship before they checked for survivors. As long as Luffy was among them, they'd fire another volley. The men aboard the ship yelled to cease fire. They begged for their lives. Luffy, however, laughed at their pleas. Chi rain. Clotted blood shards rained down on the preoccupied men. All their focus on keeping their friends from firing made them forget the actual reason. A killer was on their ship. They got to learn from their mistakes painfully. The shards were long and extremely thin, allowing them to bore into the shoulders, backs, and if you were lucky, skulls of the pirates they hit. Those who weren't killed instantly immediately tried to pull out the blood dagger dug inside them, but it simply liquefied in their hands. Luffy followed up his rain of shards by quickly stealing all the blood he spilled. Those who died were dried out in their entirety, while those injured were left weakened. He leapt to the next ship as the second volley started to hit. Luffy yawned comically as he sat on the crow's nest. These guys couldn't even fight him at this point. They were too busy fighting each other. It made it boring that no one would focus on trying to stop him without blowing apart the battleground. Fortunately, he thought up an idea. With a quick sling of the arm he sent a good-sized glob of blood below. Homunculus. After saying it, a look-alike of Luffy formed. At least, one that seemed like a blood-based monster that Krieg would destroy at any cost. Assured that this ship would be obliterated, he launched to the next and formed another one. The confusion would assure he'd get a good fight from the third ship. "Aw, man, I'm tired. You guys got any meat?" Luffy asked casually as he walked around the deck. It took longer than he expected for them to notice. One even told him where the kitchen was. These guys were total amateurs. Not even noticing a stranger on their ship. Oh well. Luffy looked out to see the confusion caused by him being in multiple places at once and smiled. Time to really confuse some pirates. He concentrated on the clones he created. If this worked, it would be devastating. Bakuden. Sure enough, it worked. His clones exploded with great force from the intense density. Shards of blood tore through the ships and pirates at incredible speeds. Each one could carve through multiple people if they didn't hit bone. Luffy gawked at his own attack as others froze in fear. It was more destructive than a cannonball fitted with explosives. The worst part was that some of the blood soared towards them and was absorbed into their uninvited guest. Those nearby didn't get to draw their weapons before Luffy beat them down. Damn it, was this the one who attacked you? Is this the kind of people on the Grand Line? Exclamation mark quote. Krieg yelled at Jin. He was too valuable to keep on another ship. None of his men would fire on the dreadnought Saber whether or not Luffy was on board. Jin had come back to assist with keeping his men in line. Krieg was a wreck from watching his precious fleet be tore apart. 5 ships from a single boy already. That was bad. The unknown fact that Luffy was growing more powerful as he fought was horrifying. No, Luffy saved me. I didn't know he could do any of this, Krieg, I swear. Jin said, trying his best to maintain his composure. It was far from what he expected when Luffy said he wanted to fight Krieg. He thought maybe a one-on-one brawl. That maybe Krieg would fight fairly and bring Luffy down easily. But it was far from it now. Krieg attacked him unprovoked and started a war. A war against a single man with the power that rivaled some monster that cut apart their ships on the Grand Line. We need to stop him. How can we stop him, Jin? Krieg was sweating heavily. His hair was a mess and his eyes were as wide as saucers. It was a frantic state Jin had never seen him in before. A disgrace of a look in his eyes. His crew, sir. Jin coughed out, clenching his fists so hard he pierced flesh with his nails. He was selling out a crew of happy people who saved his life and showed him kindness to please Krieg. It was a sickening feeling to think how far he'd go for the man. Those people were kinder than Krieg ever was. That's it. Take Pearl and a ship, no two. Get those damn rats of his and make him surrender. Krieg ordered, slamming his fist down and breaking the railing. Yes sir, Jin said, eyes closed as he walked away. Tears fell as he yelled for Pearl to sail out towards the restaurant ship. He'd need to take them all alive if they wanted a chance to get out alive themselves. Woo, you guys were a little better than those others, Luffy said as he looked around. Some of them were still breathing. Not something he expected would last long after the sound of cannon fire. He took all the blood of those he could and launched at the next ship. His limbs had to stay in blood form after all the intake. He had also grown substantially in size. He was less the nimble fighter he was at the start, and now more of a blood-soaked powerhouse. Luffy didn't need to rely on a sword anymore. His giant fist was able to crack bones in a single, still incredibly fast swing. Though he still covered his knuckles with clotted blood spikes so he didn't need to tear it out of their bodies. Most of the blows now were landing on the back of his enemies as they ran away. Disgraceful. Guys, there's some ships headed this way, Kaya said as she looked out the barricade at the approaching threat. It took all she could muster just to speak. This was too much for a first trip out to sea. Oh no, where's Luffy? Nami asked the air as if he would appear. She didn't doubt Zoro's strength or Usopp's skill, but those two against two fully armed pirate ships. Not a good scenario. Even with all these weirdly angry chefs, fighting one would be a challenge. If they had poison there wouldn't even be a fight. They'd have to hold up inside and wait for Luffy. Well, he's probably fighting the rest of them. At least now it won't be boring, Zoro said as he held onto Wado. He was itching for a battle. A big one. As long as they didn't try to blow up the ship, they stood a chance. Though if his only help was Scaredy Cat, Dartbrow, and whatever insulting nickname he could come up with for the rest of the merry little band of misfits, they'd be pressed hard. I don't know who the hell this captain of yours is, but how dare he leave such beautiful ladies unprotected? Sanji seemingly ignored the threat to his life as he knelt in front of the tall blonde woman. It took a surprising punch from the woman and the toucan man at her side for him to realize something. I have a boyfriend, you jerkface. Kaya's insults were less than powerful compared to some others, but her punch had surprising force. Yeah, me, Usopp yelled, rubbing his knuckles after the punch. He didn't have much experience actually hitting people, but it felt good. What about you, my bright beautiful star? Sanji asked the red-headed woman who was mumbling to herself. His ego needed some recognition. Zoro took the liberty of crushing his dreams by pulling him up off his knees and pointing out to the fleet. Normally trying to focus on just one person at that distance would put strain on the eyes of anyone but a sniper, but in this case the person in question was easily over 20 feet tall and was starting to structurally damage the ship he was on. That would be her boyfriend, Arrow Cook. Sanji gulped and decided to back off for the first time in his long career of being a pervert. A 20-foot-tall man ripping the mast off of a ship was a scary sight. The idea of him being murderously jealous would be even worse. Now if only he'd hurry up and finish fighting those guys and help us, Nami said out loud as she looked between the destruction in the distance and the horror up close. Are you guys even trying anymore? Luffy asked as he finished ripping the mast out of the ship. It would normally be an impossible feat, but he was nearly 4 times his previous size and his muscles never tired from the constant flow of oxygen-rich blood. They were also much more prominent, and his upper body was bulkier. With a quick swing he crushed the nearest ship along the middle, causing it to slowly sink. He was able to leach every last drop he could from it before the inhabitants sunk into the water. Can no one fight me? Luffy roared as he launched onto another ship. The force from his powerful legs tore into the ship as he leapt. The cannon fire had stopped as most of the fleet had been destroyed. The main goal was to simply get far enough away for him to be a sitting duck. At least until Krieg's plan worked. We only want the Straw Hat Boys' crew. The rest of you will be unharmed. Send them out within 3 minutes. Jin yelled at the restaurant from his position on the ship. The two were positioned right by each other, cannons aimed at them. He knew Krieg would come back for the restaurant, but he needed the crew now without blowing it to pieces. They're not going to let us go, are they? One of the chefs asked. He was a very strange-looking man with extremely buff arms holding some sort of cannon. Not a chance. This is Krieg we're dealing with. Foul play, Krieg. If we surrender, he'll kill us. So I'd rather go down fighting. The head chef, whom they learned was named Zeph, declared to them all. We don't stand a chance against those guys. The second we start to fight, they'll blow us to pieces. Usopp tried to persuade them. Surely they'd be fine if they simply surrendered. Luffy would come and rescue them, easy peasy. Why did no one get that? I'm not going to stop any of you from surrendering, but I'm not giving this place up for anyone. Zeph said as he crossed his arms, looking at the strangers. We can fight them, Usopp. At least until Luffy gets here. He protected us once, remember? Kaya reassured Usopp, rubbing his hand to comfort him. He was concerned about their lives, not their pride. Yeah, do you know how pissed Luffy would be if he knew we just surrendered? Zoro asked with a smile. He was taking the situation in his stride, holding out his inner feeling of fear. That he'd lose to overwhelming foes, cheating their way to victory. I'm not giving up either. No way I'll get this close to give up, Nami said, gripping her staff tight. Memories flooded her mind, ones she hoped would be washed away soon. Well, you heard the ladies. We're going to fight these shitty pirates tooth and nail, Sanji said, lighting his cigarette before walking out the door, ready to fight anyone who threatened them. The fight was incredible, glorious. A real underdog story. Or at least it would be if the Krieg pirates, beside Jin, had any sense of pride. The moment they saw that they'd have an actual fire on their hands, they opened fired with a few cannons, then threatened to use poison. They didn't have any on board. It was only stocked in the dreadnought and on Krieg himself. Even if they did, they wouldn't use it. They needed the crew alive to stop the rampaging behemoth. They were running out of ships, men, and time. They took every member of the Straw Hats aboard and tied them up. It was one more than expected. A weird blonde with curly eyebrows. Jin surely would have remembered such a unique face, but maybe he just didn't show up to the kitchen. So, what are you going to do with us, Jin? Zoro asked, the fire in his belly far from being put out. One of the pirates kneed him in the gut for speaking up, but was sent away shortly after by Jin himself. A simple trade. Your lives for Luffy's. He's too big a threat to let him leave alive. I can only assume we'll throw him in the sea if nothing else will work. Jin answered, not looking him in the eyes. But why are you doing this? Luffy saved you. He saved all of us. Kaya yelled, tears forming in her eyes. She didn't understand any of this. When you help someone, they should help you back. As if Klaha Kuro wasn't enough. Now him. Was no one good anymore? Shut up, pretty lady. Your mouth wasn't made for backtalk. One of the pirates sneered, walking over to her. Months on the ship with no tail left him rather ornery, and a similar sounding word. Don't you talk to her that way. I am Captain Usopp. I have a fleet of 10 million men at my disposal who could destroy you all. Usopp yelled, throwing himself over and in front of Kaya. It was a futile attempt at protecting her, but one he had to do. I'll talk to her however I damn well want. The man raised his fist to strike the boy, but ended up punching the large iron ball on Jin's tonfa. It shattered his hand and made him run back in pain, screaming bloody murder. You think I don't know that? I don't want to hurt Luffy. But I have no choice. Jin, why did you hurt his body? Pearl yelled as he saw the broken hand of the pirate. We need them to kill that boy. Shut up. He tried attacking the hostages. We can't let them get hurt. What, are you joking? Their condition won't matter as long as they're alive. We're trading their lives, not their perfect skin. He couldn't help but admire his own body amidst an angry outburst. He was more vain than Usopp in his storytelling. Well, I say no hurting them. Anyone who wants to goes through me first. Jin said coldly, spinning on the tonfas around slowly. Everyone backed away slowly, but stopped at a question. What the hell is wrong with you? Sanji asked, focusing on Jin. Their captain saves your life and returns you to your crew, and you repay him by kidnapping his crew and killing him. Ha 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 ha. That's the Krieg way. There's no fair in the world. Only survival. Right, Jin? Pearl asked, stepping closer. He believed he could talk him into letting them have fun with the captives. The entire situation drained moral. Some recreational violence would be good for everyone. That's the Krieg way, Jin said, staring to the distance at the devastation. Luffy had to slow down now that numbers were dwindling. He was avoiding attacking the flagship. He wanted every other ship first. Attack people unprovoked because they suggest another way of doing things. Exact wait huh, Jin, that should have been a happy sentence. Pearl yelled, sticking out his arms. Cheating people out of deals. Killing civilians. Going back on your promises. Leaving no survivors, the last one cut the cord. Luffy wouldn't be the only one to die. Krieg would kill all the others right after Luffy. They didn't even hurt anyone, but he wouldn't let them live. He wasn't that kind of person. That's the Krieg way. Now you're getting it, so let them have their fun with the bait. Pearl reached past them to the orange-haired girl. She was quiet and the boys may like her. Unfortunately, Jin had been twirling the tonfa for a good long time. The force that crashed down on Pearl's arm shattered not only the shield, but the arm under it. Pearl screamed in pain as he looked at his arm. It had been shattered thoroughly, some shard of which pierced the skin and left major tearing. Blood, blood, my perfect body. Dang, the next hit crashed down on Pearl's skull and ended with similar results. Third in command of the Krieg pirates fell to the ground in a mostly perfect heap. Jin stood silently, staring at the body and spinning his tonfas. Something inside his mind finally snapped. 5 people had saved his life and expected no reward. They did it out of kindness. They gave him the first food he had in days, and stayed friendly even after finding out his was their enemy. If being a Krieg pirate meant snuffing the life of people like these. Of these people, it wasn't worth it anymore. If he had snapped earlier, it may have meant a difference. But now they were approaching the flagship, and Jin didn't know if he could confront Krieg himself. Monkey D. Luffy, I have your crew and your traitor friend Jin. Give up, or they all die. Krieg yelled at the lumbering giant. He was an astonishing 40 feet tall and stopped speaking. He only roared at the people aboard the ships. At the sound of the threat, however, he stared in silence. Each one had a gun to the back of their heads. A false move and they'd be killed, even if he could manipulate their blood. That many people and someone could fight his power. Don't listen to him, Luffy. Yeah, big bro. We'll be fine, Captain. Different crew members yelled different things to the demon that was once Luffy. The outburst enraged Krieg, however he knew killing them would end in death. That could wait till after he made the boy kill himself. Shut them up, damn it. He doesn't need any bright ideas. Krieg yelled at his men. He froze in fear as the morons did something incredibly stupid. A bullet through the shoulder. The one in the middle of them all got a bullet through the shoulder. Was it the tough and durable Zoro? The man-demon? Even the boy who had taken rocks and glass before? Of course it wasn't. It was the red-headed. The loudest voice in the crowd. With a lightning-fast flick upwards, Luffy moved all of the blood in each of the executioners' bodies towards the sky. Luffy's new enhanced form had unexpectedly eased the strain on Luffy to manipulate blood. His immense storage of blood left him full of energy. The blood he moved flooded their skulls, until the pressure capped and blood left every way it could. Eyes, mouth, and nose all shot blood onto the back of the captives. Krieg couldn't believe his eyes. Seeing his plan up in smoke at the flick of a wrist was soul-crushing. The only thing he could think to do was hurt the bastard. He tried to deploy his weapons and blow them away, but he felt his entire body pulled away. In fact, he soared through the air quickly towards the giant boy made of blood. Krieg, Luffy's distorted voice yelled as he caught the man. This level of control was still taxing in this state. He couldn't just pull it out of one spot. He had to pull it all evenly towards him, effectively making him fly. Albeit painfully, Luffy stared down at the man with anger and bloodlust. With a quick cup of his head, Luffy determined his fate. Kai, bubble. Luffy's voice was slower than normal, but his insistence to call out attacks was no weaker for it. Don Krieg's head was engulfed in a bubble of blood, causing him to crash and fail as he suffered one of the most frightening deaths. Drowning over 40 feet above the sea in a bubble of blood. Luffy let out a victory yell before throwing the dead body to the horizon, causing it to skip like a stone. With one last ship-crushing launch, he was on the dreadnought Saber, though it was worse for wear after the landing. Luffy did the unthinkable as he approached, shed all of the excess blood. In a few steps he was back to normal, though the entire ship was coated in blood from it. Luffy cut all of the ropes with a few quick movements, but the only one he did personally was Nami's. He of course looked at the wound in her shoulder with fear. His insatiable bloodlust had been decimated the moment he got near. That blood needed to be back in her. Stat. Kaya, fix her, Luffy ordered, looking back at Nami. She wasn't scared. She actually smiled as Kaya rushed past the dead bodies to find their medical supplies. I knew you'd save me, she said with a smile as she looked into his eyes, giving him a kiss before a light punch with her unwounded arm. Just do it quicker next time, idiot, she teased, making Luffy smile. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.